It's the Hotch Potch launch party, episode 4.
Aaron, do you want to talk a little bit about your process with your part, your artwork that you wrote, you drew and painted?
Yeah, sure. Here's sort of like my standard shtick with art. You know what I mean? I tend to work in the realm of realism and do a lot of still life and that kind of stuff. And I've been feeling lately like I want to expand my vocabulary, and actually Katie work was a bit of the inspiration for that. And I started taking a stab at some abstract work, and it was really amazingly challenging. And with that realism stuff, I always know where well, more or less, I know where I'm going to end up. And with the abstract stuff, man, it is all this process. It's all this just like churning, 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 nothing concrete, even conceptually. So, anyway, I took a stab. I was doing some large size, medium sized works and just really struggling. So, I landed on this idea because of YouTube to start doing these really small works that were not as intimidating. So, I started working on these squares, and these are all just like 2 by 2 squares. And these might look familiar if you've looked through the issue. Some of these have shown up. Um, and so I started doing that, and so that's where a lot of those came from. I've been trying to sort of like bridge, use that abstract vocabulary and stuff I'm more familiar with. So I had taken this photograph. That's a lake in Newport, Vermont. You can see it's sort of like cloudy and foggy, and the light shining through. It's in the autumn, and so I did some of those squares sort of based on that. Sort of some are abstract, but more impressionistic, I'd say, right? Still fairly representational, and I was starting to feel a little more confident, like maybe I could start to do bigger work. And so I bumped it up to 4 by 4. And so you can see that this sort of like goes from uh more to least realistic, right? So that's almost realism, and it gets more and more impressionistic. And um in this particular case, I'm fumbling here because I'm doing more than one thing. Hold on. Um in a way that might make be important. Um So you might see this from Marco's story, and for me, like that image sort of had a vague sense of a mirror, right? That was my impressionistic version of a mirror, but in fact, in this particular case, it is this image turned on end. So, um, yeah, typically I've when I've done this stuff, I've more directly responded to the images, and this time that was less so, and some of that was oh my God, okay, thank you.
Oh, thanks, Aaron. Next up is guest writer Drew Milford, who will read from his story, The Offer. And that story was inspired by another Untitled by Katie O'Rourke.
Sure, I could read through, but I did like the Aaron, your art there with those watercolors. It's hard to see on my phone. The small 4 by 4.
Yeah, those were acrylic, actually, acrylic,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
because
it's hard to see.
it dries
I'm on my
fast.
phone, so it's like um, a millimeter by a millimeter. But sure, I'll read a little bit of the beginning of this story. Um, the story's called The Offer. She drove north of Sunset Boulevard and turned into the neighborhood from Beverly Glen, just like Mr. Rutledge had instructed. Park a few car lengths from the fire hydrant near the dead end, he'd said. You can park there as long as you want. She found a spot. He was right. Beneath a stunted lemon tree, there was an old limo with so many layers of dust that probably hadn't been moved in months. Nobody cared what got left there. She waited a moment to make sure no one was looking, and then turned off her engine, grabbed her canvas bag of flowers from the back seat, and got out. A moment later, she was jogging down the hill to distance herself from her car. She slowed to a walk only when she felt she was far enough away to look like someone who lived in the neighborhood taking a walk, or someone who had a nicer car parked somewhere else. It's just a little excerpt there, but I guess I would say just to tie into the art, like I said, I really like the artwork. I really like the colors. It was very bright to me, sunny, vibrant. Um, Reminded me of the ocean. Realizing now that the artist is based in Montpelier, maybe it's actually not the ocean, and maybe it's a lake. Maybe it's not even boats. Uh, but it gave me a sense of Southern California. I'm based here in Southern California, and I really like setting just in general, the idea of setting. So, one of the big things I think the art really, to me, evoked that setting of I don't know what you'd say, tropical, subtropical, Mediterranean, however you describe Southern California. And then I went in a little bit of a noir direction, just because I also associate that with, once you get into the Los Angeles setting, sometimes it goes in that noir direction.
I
But
had the pleasure of editing Drew's piece, and I love the noir feel. It's really well worth reading. It's just terrific, the contrast of the noir feel and the tension that he's put into the piece, contrasted with the image. It's just fabulous.
well, thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for editing it. And I'm also glad that you picked up on the noir. I guess it must have been pretty obvious, but
It
I was
comes
glad
through.
that you used that word. It came through. Yeah.
It's great. Thank you so much, Drew.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for including me.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's just a really delightful read for sure. Yeah, so let's do another poll question. Released on April 5th, 1974, what was Stephen King's debut novel? Cujo, Carrie, The Best Dark Reign, Salem's Lot, or The Band? Let's see what folks think. For those of you who don't know, there's a little bit of inside humor here. Actually, The Best Dark Reign was a novel written by Marco, and The Band was a novel written by Christine. So I can't fool anybody in this group. All right, has everybody voted? All right, let's see. See what we've got. 20% of the people say Cujo, 70% say Carrie, and 10% say Salem's Lot. Actually, in fact, it is Carrie, which I didn't know before I was doing the research before this event. Let's do one more. This is an art-related one. Which of the following artists contracted polio as a child? Grandma Moses, Katie O'Rourke, Frida Kahlo, or Leonora Carrington? Has everybody gotten their vote in? I think I've got 5. All right, let's see where we are. 1 for Grandma Moses, 5 for Frida Kahlo, and 3 for Leonora Carrington. In fact, it was Frida Kahlo. And when we were testing this and someone said she had that big accident and she got polio, and the answer is yes.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I thought it was the accident.
Too much for one life, but yeah.
Well, and she had to be married to Diego Rivera. So
Yeah. So let's jump ahead to Wood Reed.
okay, yay.
Wrote the story that summer, which was inspired by Untitled Green Floor, which is another work by Stephanie Snyder. So maybe Aaron, if you could show that while Marilyn is either talking or reading. I don't know.
I'll do both. So I chose this image because it reminded me of summer, and it reminded me of, I have a lot of family that lives in Greece. And so I've gone there quite a bit, and it reminded me of that. And it has this great sort of arid feeling, which also is much like Los Angeles, where I live. And yeah, and it just kind of spoke to me. And it's very simple. And yeah, so I can read just an excerpt from the story. I have a photograph of us that summer. The colors muted, our faces relaxed and sunburnt, our bodies lazy, limbs draped across the ruins of a temple, the name of which I cannot remember. What was the name of that temple, that ruin of a temple? I ask as if you are next to me, as if you can answer. That summer, we ate octopus and walked without shoes and drifted from day to day. The islands pulsed and pulled and embraced us. We breathed velvet air and offered gentle smiles, conserving our energy for long afternoons spent doing nothing. We were sheltered. We were cocooned. We were spun in silk, protected from weeds and worry and sharp edges. You taught me to say Efaristo and Parakaro, and I never got the pronunciation right. No one minded, though you were perplexed by my disconnect when it came to languages. It didn't matter. You did the talking for the both of us. Languages were your thing, not mine.
Thank you, Marilyn. It was lovely. And another just really deeply beautiful and sensitive and engaging story. I loved it.
Thank you.
You can read Hotch Potch Volume 3, Issue 1 at BookFunnel, or you can download your free PDF copy or EPUB. Next up, Part 5.